bombshell new lawsuit that involves Sean Diddy Combs, but isn't against the disgraced music mogul. As Diddy is listening to closing arguments in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial in federal court in New York, his son, Justin, has been hit with a lawsuit by a woman who claims that he lured her to Los Angeles to be raped by multiple men, including his dad, Sean Diddy Combs.
Everything was already spiraling, but this is the moment where it all flips into something way darker, way bigger, and way more explosive than anyone thought possible. Because now it's not just the powerful mogul under fire.
How about the timing of this new lawsuit involving the son of Sean Diddy Combs? It was just in the hours after the government on Thursday finished their closing arguments in the case against the disgraced music mogul that we learned about this new lawsuit against Sean Combs' son, Justin. Justin is one of Diddy's 7 kids. Here he is with his dad's arm around his shoulder. Justin has been in court supporting his dad just as his siblings have been over the past 7 weeks of testimony. Now, listen, whatever your feelings are on Sean Combs and whether you think he's guilty of the charges that could put him in federal prison for the rest of his life, you just have to think how difficult it must be to hear about all the sexual exploits of their father. But if you believe the allegations I'm about to tell you in this new lawsuit brought against Justin Combs, Justin apparently was very aware of his dad's lifestyle. The new lawsuit that just dropped was filed by a woman from Louisiana who says in 2017, Justin Combs coaxed her to come to LA because she says that Diddy's son promised her a job in the entertainment industry. She claims the two had met on Snapchat, and Justin allegedly asked for explicit pictures, and she sent them. The woman, who's not named in this suit, says when she got to LA, she was raped by several men, including a certain music mogul now at the center of this high-profile, historic trial in federal court in Lower Manhattan. Yes, Sean Diddy Combs. The alleged victim claims that Justin invited her out west for a weekend to talk about her career. But when she got there, she says she was kept in a house in Beverly Hills. And according to the lawsuit, things seemed fine at first, but when she allegedly asked Justin Combs if they were going to leave the house, he said no. She claims that Justin Combs offered her alcohol, pills, and weed, and she thinks that the weed was laced. Now, you can see in those allegations some of the comparisons in this lawsuit to the so-called freak-offs that we have been hearing about for weeks at the center of the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial. The woman says after she took the drugs, 3 men entered the house and all of them were wearing masks. Now, it's unclear what kind of masks the men were wearing, but when I read that part, I thought about the testimony of Sheree Hayes in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, the escort known as the Punisher. He testified that during a freak-off, Sean Combs allegedly wore a face covering that he likened to a Muslim hijab. In the lawsuit against Justin Combs, the alleged victim says that she knew that one of the men was Diddy just because of his mannerisms, but how about this? She also knew it was Diddy because she says that Justin, as his dad, entered the home to allegedly rape a woman that he brought to LA, called Diddy, quote, Pops. Now, we see on Justin's social media that Pops is the phrase that he often uses for his dad. In this lawsuit, the alleged victim claims that she was led to a bedroom where she was allegedly told, quote, you better let this happen or else. Then she says that each man took a turn raping her, calling it a, quote, brutal gang rape. After that, she was taken to an airport on Monday and flown home. Not only is Diddy facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison if convicted of all the charges in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial, there have been nearly 80 lawsuits filed against him in civil court. Many are still active. Several of the lawsuits accuse Diddy of sexual abuse and are filed by people who are not giving their names, just like in this lawsuit that we're talking about. This also isn't the first lawsuit that Justin Combs has recently faced. Justin was named in a suit brought by music producer Rodney Jones, who goes by Little Rod. Rod claims that Diddy coerced him into sexual acts, and you can see the suit also names Justin Combs and accused Justin of covering up a shooting in 2022 at Little Rod's studio in LA with his dad. In May, a judge did dismiss Justin from Little Rod's lawsuit, so he is no longer facing those allegations. As for the lawsuit filed,
it's not just the empire he built or the secrets people whispered about for years. This time, the storm has swallowed his entire circle, including the people he always kept right beside him, his own sons. And the moment this massive new lawsuit dropped, the whole industry froze like someone slammed the brakes on a speeding train. Nobody expected this. Nobody saw it hitting this hard. But the allegations coming out now? They're shaking everything to its core. This lawsuit is not small. It's not petty. It's not someone throwing dirt for quick attention. It's massive, detailed, aggressive, and filled with accusations that make every previous rumor sound like child's play. And the craziest part is that the lawsuit isn't just targeting one person. It's pulling the mogul and his son straight into the fire, dragging them through allegations that paint a picture of a system that's been operating behind closed doors for years. A system built on silence, power, and intimidation. And now that silence is broken. According to the lawsuit, there were patterns of behavior, patterns of exploitation, patterns of control that didn't just affect the people.
Filed in the hours before his dad's attorneys were to make closing arguments, E! News reports that Diddy's attorneys have denied the allegations, but it's unclear what Justin's response is at the time of this recording. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney Will Corman. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us. What stands out to you in this lawsuit that Sean Combs is named, but also his son Justin?
Well, it's interesting. I think the connection to Sean Combs is pretty tenuous. You know, we've gone through this all. It almost seems the one connection to Sean Combs that they actually put on him is the allegation that Justin called one of the masked men Pops during the course of the assault or just before the assault. That's it. The other connection, obviously, is that Sean Combs is Justin Combs' dad. So I think it's a bit of a stretch. Again, we're just receiving these documents now. We're just going through this lawsuit now. Perhaps there's more out there, but it really doesn't seem that way.
And of course, people who are victims of sexual violence, you want them to get their justice. We have seen dozens of lawsuits filed against Justin's dad in the wake of when he was indicted for the trial that he's on right now. How do you go through these lawsuits and understand who's telling the truth and who actually has a case that could be heard in court? Someone like Cassie Ventura, when you see that video from 2016, or you do look at some of these Jane Doe lawsuits and you wonder how many of them are true.
Look, as a criminal defense attorney, it's my job to be cynical, and it's my job to, review everything with a pretty jaundiced eye. So the question really becomes are there corroborating facts and circumstances from Jump Street that make sense? So for example, if this lawsuit is alleging that something happened in LA during a specific period of time, do we know that Sean Combs was there? Do we actually know that he was present in LA? These things aren't difficult to find out, but it's those baby steps to trying to build the foundation of a lawsuit to see what's realistic that really matter in a case like this. And as you so correctly said, we want victims of domestic violence, of sexual violence, and so on and so forth to actually be compensated accordingly. Unfortunately, when we have circumstances where we have somebody famous who's been charged with crimes, we have somebody famous who's been sued, there can be instances where other folks jump on the bandwagon. And I'm not suggesting that's what's happening here, but it is something that everyone needs to look at skeptically.
Right, absolutely. If you were to bring a lawsuit against someone like Justin Combs, or any of these, and even the cases involving his dad, and you're bringing a civil suit, what facts do you need to have? I mean, certainly if you have a victim who says that this happened and they're ready to, they're able to provide some corroborating evidence that something happened, what do you actually need to be able to go to the courthouse and say, I'm filing a lawsuit against this person?
I think that you need to have somebody who's willing to state under oath that this is what happened to me, that this is what I'm alleging, these are my damages, this is how it's impacted me. And as an attorney, again, I would want to make sure, especially in a lawsuit like this where it involves a high-profile person, but quite frankly, in any lawsuit, that there is some corroborating information out there so that my lawsuit isn't tossed out of court pretty quickly.
And reading through this complaint, it mentions several other lawsuits. You have the lawsuit from Rodney Jones, who's known as Little Rod, and Sean Combs is facing that lawsuit, and his son was named in it, but has since been dropped. What do you make about it having all these other different cases and elements brought in? What is the attorney here trying to prove?
Inside the circle but spread outward, catching anyone who stepped too close. The accusers say the mogul wasn't acting alone. They say certain people around him knew what was happening, participated, assisted, or benefited from what was going on. And that's where the sons come in. The lawsuit puts them right in the middle of situations they never thought would follow them, exposing moments they thought stayed hidden forever. People online are going insane. Some are shocked. Some say they knew something was off for years. Some are demanding more information. But the truth is this: nobody expected it to escalate to this level. Because once you drag family into the battlefield, there's no going back. It's no longer a scandal, it's a collapse. From what the lawsuit describes, the environment these sons grew up in wasn't a normal household. It wasn't even a normal celebrity household. It was a world built on chaos disguised as luxury. A world where nothing was truly private, where power protected everything, and where consequences never seemed to exist. And according to the allegation,
Well, it almost appears as if the attorney is saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. So here are all these other lawsuits, and I've reviewed the complaint, and they talk about them in some detail. They don't just list them. They say, this happened on this date, and this person sued Sean Combs here, and this person sued Sean Combs here for this set of facts and circumstances. And they're essentially trying to say, because there's all these other lawsuits, you should give this one a stamp of approval, because again, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Tony Busby, his law firm is bringing this. He has been in the civil world a very, very prominent name. For those who don't know him, and you work in criminal defense, what do you know about Tony Busby? Knowing that it's his law firm bringing this, what does that tell you?
I don't think that the Busby law firm is taking these allegations lightly. I believe they have the resources to do their own investigations prior to actually filing these suits. So this isn't some, sole practitioner who's trying to jump on the cottage industry that's been created around suing Sean Combs. I think that they have the ability to investigate this. They have the ability to decide whether or not they want to take on these cases. And I think that does lend some credibility, albeit, not a ton, but I think it does lend some credibility to the facts and circumstances surrounding it. In other words, this alleged victim didn't just walk in off the street to some random law firm who then is saying, oh, we now have the ability to sue Sean Combs. This is someone who's been down this well-trod path before and probably knows exactly what the pitfalls are in suing somebody as prominent as Sean Combs.
This lawsuit came down at the time we're recording this, came down last night. So that was a couple hours after the government finished their closing arguments against Sean Combs. And as we're recording this right now, Sean Combs, his defense team is giving his closing argument. What do you make about the timing of this? It's against Justin Combs and Sean Combs' name, but it's happening right in the middle of maybe the most pivotal part of this entire trial.
I don't exactly know what to make of the timing of it. I think it's interesting. I think that I'm a little surprised that it's come out so late, but sometimes we don't know what led the alleged victim in this lawsuit to break their silence and to file this lawsuit. Perhaps they were watching the testimony or reviewing the testimony in the criminal case and said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened to me. Perhaps they said, they listened to the testimony and they said, there are so many victims here. I believe that I am one too. We don't know what prompted it. I think the timing is interesting, but I don't know that I can make anything of it as we sit here right now.
I think of recently you had Tyler Perry, prominent name in Hollywood, very different case, but accused of sexual violence and sexual harassment, workplace harassment with an actor who had worked on one of his shows, and the actor provided text messages in the complaint. This doesn't have that. Very different case. But the fact that there's not that visual evidence that we can look at, and I don't know what type of visual evidence would exist in a case like this, but the fact that we don't particularly have those, does that take away from the weight of what this lawsuit may actually be in the end when it comes to the truth?
Well, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, because the filing of a complaint is just simply the first step. And all the complaint needs to do, on paper anyway, is set forth the factual allegations that are enough to sort of not get the case thrown out at the first few stages. And that bar is pretty low. So
that environment shaped them. It molded them, maybe even corrupted them. The lawsuit paints a picture of sons who weren't just bystanders. They were allegedly surrounded by activities, scenes, and behaviors that no young person should be near. And over time, that line between what was normal and what was insane slowly blurred. What makes this even crazier is how far back the allegations go. Some people involved say they were warned to stay away years ago. Others say they saw the signs but stayed silent because speaking up felt dangerous. And now that someone finally pulled the trigger and filed the lawsuit, a floodgate opened. More people are coming forward. More details are being dropped. More accusations are surfacing. And every single one adds another heavy brick to the wall closing in around the mogul and his sons. But let's talk about the reaction inside that inner circle, because the silence is loud. The mogul, who always had something to say, suddenly has nothing. No statements, no interviews, no denials. The sons are disappearing from public spaces.
Her account, aside from a potential other witness, right, the person that allegedly walked in on this, what proof is there that this happened? Well, she reportedly has photos of the bruises that she says were caused by this event with Christian Combs. But she also claims that in that studio, during that first interaction at the time, was Rodney Jones, that former Diddy music producer I mentioned, the one who is suing Diddy. He's known as Little Rod Jones. Remember, he had been basically living with Diddy while the two worked on his latest album. As we discussed on previous sidebars, Jones made multiple allegations against Diddy in his own lawsuit, saying that there was rampant drinking, drug use, sexual assault during Diddy's parties. He claims that he was groped by Diddy, that he was the victim of sex trafficking as he was forced to engage in sex acts with sex workers. He even claims that Diddy groomed him for homosexual sex and facilitated for him to be sexually abused by actor Cuba Gooding Jr. He also claims that there are hours of audio and video footage documenting Diddy's alleged crimes and misconduct. And according to Miss Omarkey, Jones taped this event with her. Yes, the lawsuit provides transcripts of audio recordings, and these audio recordings purportedly show, or you can hear, kissing sounds, her telling Combs not to touch her, her allegedly asking about whether she was drugged. Now, we haven't heard these tapes here on Law and Crime yet, but if they are what they purport to be, that is a huge piece of evidence. And remember, when we're talking a civil case, when we're talking lawsuits, the burden of proof is much lower than a criminal case. It's just preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not that this happened. So the civil suit accuses Christian of assault, battery, sexual assault, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They're a big part of this lawsuit. She goes into the mental anguish that she has gone through, the emotional harm that she has suffered as a result of that. It's important in order to prove damages. And by the way, she is claiming unspecified damages, so she hasn't put a number amount on it. But Diddy, let's go back to him. He is also named as a defendant. He is accused of aiding and abetting Christian's behavior, as well as having premises liability because he was the leaseholder of the yacht. Now, premises liability means that you have a duty to keep people on your property safe from injuries. We actually saw a lot of that same kind of theory in the Jones lawsuit when he was talking about this shooting that happened at Chalice Studios, and the owners and occupiers of that studio should just be as responsible as the people who allegedly engaged in that shooting that he was present for. Now, by the way, not sure if these new allegations could play a role in a future federal criminal prosecution of Combs. We're talking so much about the investigation into them. It could be that this is just an isolated incident here and could not be part of a sex trafficking charge. Although I do wonder if this Christian Combs incident or alleged incident could be part of a potential RICO or racketeering charge. As I mentioned on a previous sidebar, when I laid out potential charges that Diddy could face, if we are talking about conspiracy to violate the RICO statute, RICO organized crime, that's what I'm talking about here, that there was a criminal enterprise, to prove that, you would need to show that there was an agreement to break the law, there was an agreement to have this criminal enterprise, and that there were steps or overt acts that were taken in furtherance of that criminal enterprise. Overt acts don't even have to be
going low profile, moving like they're trying to outrun something that's already caught up to them. And behind the scenes, according to people who claim to know, there's panic, real panic, lawyers scrambling, crisis managers working overtime, people deleting old photos, old posts, old connections, everyone trying to distance themselves from something they can't escape. The industry isn't handling it well either. Executives are terrified, collaborators are backtracking, brands are ghosting, people who once bragged about being connected to this empire are suddenly pretending they never met anyone, because now that lawsuits are flying around with actual evidence, nobody wants their name anywhere near it. Everyone is scrambling to protect themselves because they know exactly how destructive this is going to get. But the wildest part? This lawsuit might only be the beginning. People close to the situation say there's more coming, more filings, more accusations, more witnesses who've been sitting in the shadows for years, waiting for the moment when speaking up wouldn't get them crushed.
Potentially drugged women. This is something Lil Rod is saying. How would the feds go about proving something like that? I know that's the pattern we've seen across a lot of these civil suits, that women allege Diddy, for instance, drugged them. But now Lil Rod's also pointing the finger at Justin Combs, saying he drugged some of these women. How would the feds then go to look further into that?
Yeah, Lil Rod's lawsuit is interesting in that there are many defendants. We talked about Christina Horam, right? Some of the allegations that came out in Lil Rod's lawsuit was Christina, of course, being Combs' right-hand woman. She allegedly had the fanny pack with the drugs that were provided to the sex workers. There are the allegations directly against Justin as well. So whenever you're proving something like this, obviously, you're going to rely on the testimony of witnesses. You know, it could be independent witness, because the sex workers, even though they're participants in a sex act, they won't necessarily be charged, or I don't think they're going to be defendants in the lawsuit if the allegation is that they were forced to perform these sex acts and it wasn't just a commercial transaction. So you can rely on that testimony. Obviously, Lil Rod himself, but he's a plaintiff, so his testimony may be biased, may be true, but it's certainly something that you would want more of if you are a prosecutor. And then you look to video and you look to other types of evidence, maybe text messages, something that corroborates what Lil Rod has said. And of course, if you have someone like Horam who flips, that would be very, very helpful for prosecutors, because we know that former employees, they usually have a lot of information and they can be leveraged in a criminal case or even a civil one to cooperate to save themselves.
I want to talk more about that, the flipping of all this, because right now Diddy is the only one who has been charged federally in relation to this scheme, this alleged scheme. But as you pointed out, there are other people who have been identified as participants in all this. Christina Coram obviously is the main one, along with the Combs enterprise or empire, whatever you want to call it. She has not yet been charged, but I'm pretty sure, as you've told me in the past, probably this interview and many others, the feds are going to be talking to Christina Coram, and it would be in her best interest likely to cooperate with them. But what about Justin and Christian? I mean, they're so close to Diddy. They're his sons, and they have accusations against them. They could, as you said, face these charges in the future. What do you think? Do you think that they would flip?
I think it's a lot less likely that Justin and Christian would flip. I've seen children testify against their parents. We've seen it on Law and Crime many times, and obviously it makes for great drama and courtroom theatrics. But I think in a case like this, it's going to be less likely. They really owe everything to their father, right? He's obviously someone with significant financial means. He's someone that's going to pay for their lawyers and protect them. I think it would be pretty surprising to see a flip like that. Of course, anything's possible, but I think it's less likely, given that there are people that really don't have that familial tie. They don't have their legacy. They don't have potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to lose if they end up turning sideways on their parents. So it's obviously a possibility. I think it's highly unlikely, especially what we saw during that first hearing. The children all being in court, directly supporting Combs, him waving and blowing kisses to them. I think a flip is unlikely with respect to Justin and Christian.
Yeah, what do you make of that? Obviously, they're supporting their father, as you've discussed. They were actually in the courtroom supporting him, as you said, blowing kisses, all of that. But then there's also headlines, photos, videos of Christian Combs, who's been out partying after all this. People are obviously clamoring at any sort of Diddy news. But do these two have to kind of keep in mind that the focus is going to be on them? They are being watched, I mean, in relation to what their dad was doing, but also their allegations against them. I mean, is this something they should be keeping in mind, their public image?
The mogul spent decades building an empire of influence, an empire that protected him, shielded him, made him untouchable. But now that cracks are showing, people who were once afraid are starting to feel brave. People who were silenced before finally feel like they have backup. And the more people speak, the harder it becomes for the mogul or his sons to deny anything. People always assumed the empire was built on charisma, business genius, timing, influence, connections. But now, the lawsuit paints a completely different picture. It describes a world behind the scenes where power didn't just elevate, it corrupted. A world where the walls were thick, the rooms were dark, and the rules were whatever he decided they were in the moment. The lawsuit also points out something horrifying, that this wasn't just about power, or fame, or status. It was about control. Control over every situation, control over every person, control over every outcome. And now that control is gone, for the first time ever, the empire isn't running the narrative. The streets are, the victims are, the public is, and the
crimes. They could just be events. They could be things that happen. So could this be an example of an overt act? Could this be an overt act to further this enterprise of illegal sex and power? Could be a stretch. Yes, just something that came to my mind. Now, Miss O'Markey, her attorney, Tyrone Blackburn, said after this lawsuit was filed, quote, "Like father, like son, it gives us no joy or pleasure in filing this suit against Christian Combs, who has clearly adopted his father's pattern and practice of depravity." So far, there has been no response from Christian or his attorney at the time of this lawsuit. But a little side note about Tyrone Blackburn, the attorney representing Miss O'Markey and Mr. Jones. United States District Court Judge for the Southern District of New York, Denise Coate, had some very harsh words for Mr. Blackburn and has even submitted a referral to the New York Federal Court Grievance Committee, claiming issues with Blackburn in 5 cases. In her order, she writes, quote, "Significant resources have been spent by judges of the court and defendants named in actions he has filed to address glaring deficiencies in his filings. A referral to this court's grievance committee is warranted." Judge Coate goes on to write, quote, "A reasonable inference from Blackburn's pattern of behavior is that he improperly files cases in federal court to garner media attention, embarrass defendants with salacious allegations, and pressure defendants to settle quickly." She goes on to write, "Indeed, his submissions to this court have been rife with disturbing allegations against the defendants and defense counsel." So the big theme here is that he allegedly files lawsuits in the wrong jurisdictions and courts, and even allegedly called a defense attorney, quote, "a disgusting racist." Now, this is being reported by Billboard, and in fact, Blackburn wrote an email to Billboard responding to Judge Coate's order saying, quote, "Not sure how this is at all relevant to Rodney Jones's case or any other case I have. This will not have any impact on my ability to proceed in Mr. Jones's case. Although Judge Coate's decision was a referral to the SDNY's grievance committee and not a sanction, I plan on appealing the decision." But remember, the Jones lawsuit was filed in the Southern District of New York, a federal court. So it does seem to have some impact, if you ask me. And look, while we don't know the specifics of these allegations, they do come on the heels of other criticism from other lawyers. After Blackburn filed the lawsuit on behalf of Mr. Jones, Combs' attorney, Sean Hawley, alleged that Blackburn ignored basically exonerating evidence. The quote was, "Our attempts to share this proof with Mr. Jones' attorney, Tyrone Blackburn, have been ignored, as Mr. Blackburn refuses to return our calls." Hawley goes on to say, "We will address these outlandish allegations in court and take all appropriate action against those who make them." Then the attorneys for Universal Music Group, one of the defendants who are also being sued by Rodney Jones for their alleged participation and facilitation of the abuse and trafficking claimed by Jones, they argued that the claims were so, quote, "offensively false" that one of these attorneys, Donald Zakarin, wrote, "A license to practice law is a privilege. Mr. Blackburn, plaintiff's lawyer, has misused that license to self-promote gratuitously."
Truth is spreading too fast for anyone to bury. This is why the sons are so deep in it, because if they were raised in an environment where control, manipulation, and dominance were considered normal, then the lawsuit wants to know just how much they absorbed, just how much they participated, just how much they witnessed, and whether they knowingly became part of the machine that hurt people. That's the real nightmare here, not just the accusations but the implication that this wasn't one man acting alone. It was a system, a culture, a lifestyle. And the lawsuit hits the mogul exactly where it hurts: legacy. Because once your own children become part of the scandal, the legacy you spent your whole life building doesn't just fall, it burns. People who followed this empire for years say they saw the signs. They saw the weird dynamics. They saw the way the sons moved, always confident, always protected, always shielded from every consequence. And now, with these allegations dragging them into the spotlight, people are asking whether that protection came with darkness attached, whether they were taught that power meant getting away with anything, whether the empire groomed them into continuing the cycle, intentionally or not. And that's the part nobody wants to say out loud. If the allegations are true, then this wasn't one generation's corruption, it was being passed to the next. And that makes this lawsuit a generational bomb that could wipe out the entire family's reputation, influence, and legacy. Meanwhile, investigators are reportedly circling, federal pressure is rising, more people are being questioned, old files are being reviewed, every past incident is being re-examined under a new lens. This isn't a lawsuit anymore, it's a dismantling, a demolition of everything this mogul built. And whether the sons are innocent or guilty, they're now standing right in the blast zone. And the world is watching. Watching as an empire that once seemed unstoppable collapses piece by piece. Watching as the people who once lived like royalty suddenly have to face consequences they never imagined. Watching as long-buried secrets claw their way back to the surface. This is not a scandal, this is a reckoning. And if this lawsuit is just the first strike, then the next chapters are going to be even darker, even deeper, and even more destructive than anything we've seen yet. Because once the doors to the truth swing open, they don't close again. This is only the beginning.